So, good afternoon, everybody. I see it's 3 o'clock, so I think we're just going to start. We have a lot of discuss, so I think we can use your time well. I'm very happy to moderate this session this afternoon on organic and carbon farming. This session is part of a bigger conference. Maybe you already have seen a lot of webinars today or the conference yesterday. It was very interesting, I think, on business models and policies regarding carbon farming. With some very interesting discussions. Um, and I already learned a lot today from all the different webinars. These webinar series are part of the Interreg North Sea Region Carbon Farming Project that we're running now for a little over 3 years. So this is our final conference where we kind of combine our insights that we got on the topic of carbon farming, and we also invited some guests from other projects. I'm working for Bionex. My name is Niels Heining. Bionex is the Dutch umbrella organization for organic food and farming. And we are very happy actually to see that the EU is now also aiming for carbon farming and at the same time for an increase in organic production. And today we would like to see if there's actually a nice combination possible between the two of those. And therefore I invited Hanna Winkler and Hans-Martin Palsen to give a presentation on their insights on this topic, carbon farming and organics. And I would like to start with Hanna. Hanna is working for IFOAM, uh, IFOAM Organic Europe, and she's the policy coordinator on agriculture and farming. Uh, and she will first give a little bit of a wider perspective on organic carbon farming and climate change. And after that, Hans Martin will go a little bit more in depth. I think the research he has been doing or has studied on this topic. Um, Please feel free to ask all your questions in the chat. I will have a look on that. And after both presentations, we hope to have a nice discussion with you. But first, Hanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Niels, and hello to everyone. So I'm having issues to control my presentation now. I'll try to stop sharing it and reshare it again. Okay, now it works perfect. Okay, so let me just start right away with saying that soil health is one of the cornerstones of organic farming. And many management practices that are common in organic farming, like cover crops or intercropping, are supporting the fertility and the quality of agricultural soils, which can be seen in, for example, a higher abundance and biomass of earthworms, or an increased aggregate stability, water holding capacity, and so on. And furthermore, organically managed soils show also an increased soil organic carbon content and an increased soil carbon sequestration rate when compared to conventional management. But organic farming has also many other benefits. One of them being that organic farms show a higher species richness and sustain around 30% more biodiversity. It also contributes to resilience and adaptation. So the soil properties are helping to be resilient against extreme weather conditions like droughts or floods, or help prevent erosion. And they also show a higher resistance to pests and diseases. Furthermore, that no synthetic fertilizer is used reduces the greenhouse gas emissions that are happening by producing synthetic fertilizer. And organic farming also protects environmental resources like soil and water by not using synthetic fertilizer, but also using no pesticides. This graph that's on the right side, that's from the Solmark project. That was a project about climate-friendly practices in organic farming, where several practices such as optimized tillage system, agroforestry, and optimized crop rotations were tested and used for organic farmers to become even more climate-friendly. So the EU has set a 25% target of EU agricultural land under organic farming by 2030. And this will also have a positive impact then on the carbon stocks in European soil due to higher soil organic carbon stocks in organically managed land. But what is important when talking about carbon farming is that the focus should always lie on an ambitious emission reduction. And we should also be realistic about the potential that soil carbon sequestration actually has, because there are different estimates, but probably it's only around a quarter to a third that soil carbon sequestration in agricultural soils can actually compensate for agricultural emissions. We need a holistic approach that looks not only at carbon, but also biodiversity and other environmental objectives. And the multiple benefits that agroecology has for all these objectives should therefore be also acknowledged. In the IPES and IPCC report, it is stated that ignoring the inseparable nature of climate, biodiversity, and human quality of life will result in non-optimal solutions to either crisis. So we have to keep in mind that the biodiversity and climate crisis are highly interlinked, and they need to be therefore addressed together, and solutions need to be done that address those and try to address those together. So therefore we need a systemic and a holistic approach that looks at biodiversity and climate, but also soil, water, and other environmental objectives, and not just from a single perspective of carbon. And therefore we need strong biodiversity and environmental safeguards, because, for example, in regenerative or conservation agriculture, still the use of glyphosate is sometimes the case, so that would lead to trade-offs then with biodiversity protection objectives, or when land with high biodiversity value is converted, for example. And it's also important to not just look at mitigation, but also look at adaptation and creating resilient farming systems. So a food systems approach is needed that doesn't look just only at production, but also at the food system as such. So at food waste, healthy and sustainable diets, fair distribution, and so on. So how can carbon farming benefit organic farmers? Farmers are contributing in various ways to climate action and protection of biodiversity and environmental resources, and they should also be rewarded for the contributions they're making. And supporting agroecological practices can play a role in increasing the soil carbon content, but also ensuring the long-term management of carbon stocks, and contribute to soil health and biodiversity protection. And therefore, these benefits should be acknowledged and recognized. And the focus should not lie on technological solutions or favoring intensive approaches that might only look at increasing carbon, but still go beyond the carrying capacity of our ecosystems. So connected with carbon markets, there are some issues that farmers might not benefit if the price is too low, or what we know is that the monitoring and reporting costs can be very high. But also the long-term management of the soil carbon stocks has to be ensured, because it's highly reversible if the management practice changes. And organic farmers have already in the past contributed to higher soil organic carbon stocks due to their management practices, and these past efforts should be acknowledged as well. And keeping also in mind that there is a level off of sequestration rates, but also that the sequestration potential varies a lot and is site specific, depending on soil conditions or climatic conditions. So the remuneration of farmers should not only happen through the market and the consumer, also keeping in mind that we don't have true cost accounting for food and farming, but public policies are needed. So we need public money for public goods, and the CAP should therefore remunerate farmers proportional to the benefits they provide, and the contributions they're making to protect natural resources. And we need to ensure to boost organic or increase organic production, but also demand, but at the same time ensure farm advisory services that are geared towards agroecology and can facilitate this knowledge building and transfer. And lastly, we also have to ensure that the carbon stocks that are built up need to be well maintained. Thank you. That's it from my side for now, and back to you, Niels.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hannah, for very interesting insights in this topic. I see one question in the chat. I would like to ask you, Hannah, before we move to Hans Martin. Sauer is asking, do you mean with emission reduction of emissions from the soil, or doing your total agricultural practice?
Total agricultural, yeah, in agriculture in general. So also, for example, as mentioned before, like when using synthetic fertilizer, we have a lot of greenhouse gas emissions and so on. So in total, yeah.
Yeah, clear. Thank you. Yeah, I also have some other things I could ask you, but I think we first move to Hans Martin, and then we can have a discussion with the three of us and the people in the chat. So thank you for now, and we see you back in a bit, Hannah. Hans Martin, can you share your presentation?
Yes, I try to do.
So Hans Martin is working for the Tunen Institute on organic farming. You see in your researcher, and the Tunen Institute is also a partner within the carbon farming project. So they've been doing a lot of work on getting the numbers right, investigating the multiple techniques farmers can use. And now Hans Martin will tell more about organic and those techniques. Hans Martin.
Okay, thank you. So I hear that you can see my presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So I would like to give some insights on the role of organic farming in carbon farming, and if organic farmers are able to sequester more carbon dioxide, carbon in their soils in future, and give some hints what could be done, and would like to discuss some drawbacks and points to discuss at the end. So at the beginning, in all farming systems, it's important to mind additionality of measures you take in soil sequestration for climate protection. Something must be newly generated and fixed to have an effect for the climate. So that means you need new biomass on your sites and farms to have a climate effect. You need to bind this biomass in soil. And we have to know that soil carbon is reversible. It can easily degrade and go to the atmosphere again. So you need a permanent management and permanent taking care for this carbon in soil. And you must mind that we have some leakage effects. There can be other emissions of climate gases. One highly discussed one is laughing gas. It's connected with the increased nitrogen contents of soil and increased nitrogen application or manure application. But also other greenhouse gases might be important, and especially if you completely change the system to organic with very, very low output. If you take most of your soils out of productions, you need to produce goods for the food market elsewhere, and there you will have the emissions on another point of the world. So that's one important point for leakage discussions. And already Hannah hinted to this, soils are limited in capacity. The process is not endless, and on a certain site, under certain management, you will reach sometimes, or you will reach a equilibrium sometimes from input and output, and so you cannot increase the soil carbon content endlessly. And we should know that agriculture, or future agriculture, has some highly important general duties. We have to reduce livestock, especially the ruminant numbers in the world, to reduce methane emissions. And we should care for our peatland. We should restore and protect it. And we should also protect our grassland. We should protect our forests, and probably it will be a political way or a political discussion to enlarge the forest area in future, because the carbon binding of forests can be very efficient, and we have to protect forests. And one general demand is that in all systems we need to be sufficiently productive, because we need the food for increasing number of mankind in the world. And so even organic farms need to be at least should have in focus that they have to offer enough food for the growing world. And Hannah already mentioned some general advances organic farming has in comparison to other farming systems. What we know is that we have a relatively low energy input per area. This is related to mineral fertilizer use and lower pesticide use or no pesticide use. And the use of regional feedstuff and concentrates might be of importance. So organic farming does not rely on, let's say, Brazilian soy crops. And in general, they have more soil organic carbon friendly crop rotations, because they need legumes in their rotations, and also they have multi-annual crops in their rotations, and they normally have a close area animal manure relationship. So the recycling of the manure and biomass is enhanced in these farms. This is also true for lots of conventional farms, but it's always good to have a close relationship and see what you have and use it, let's say, with the highest nutrient efficiency, and you should know what you do. In terms of methane, an advantage of organic farming is that they have low stocking densities in general, because we have limit by, let's say, the EU law on stocking densities. So we have within the system an inherent lower livestock density. And we generally have lower N surplus, nitrogen surplus in the fields, and that has high effects on the potential losses of laughing gas. So what comes out for the climate? If you look at area-related carbon dioxide equivalent emissions, so that covers all climate gases, this is in comparison normally low. But if you go on the product level, due to the lower yields in plant production, but also in livestock production, the emissions are medium to variable and line up to good conventional management. So that's in terms of product-related emissions, there's no clear advantage, but you have it in an area view. So, and if you think on 100% organic farming in an area, you will have lower emissions from this area, and you only have to discuss if you can feed the people living there at the end or on the road. So important for future introduction and acceptance of organic farming is the food security, which can be secured by the system, and we have to have a look at the consumption habits. So we need more vegetarian food, we need less livestock-related food to, let's say, come in a good balance. And we have to discuss it under consideration of the yield level where we are. So it's always difficult to discuss the introduction of organic farming in comparison to really high-yielding, highly technical equipped farms in the North European region, because the yield level in plant production can be really much lower in organic farming. So that's a discussion we have to face, that we have to have this discussion. And further important is to discuss other sustainability goals like biodiversity or travel in local regions and trade in local regions and all these other things. And at the end, it's a policy decision we have to take with all these changes we need, and we have to define the role of organic farming. So I started with the advantages of organic farming system for the climate. So I said we have more soil organic carbon friendly crop rotations. That is closely related to the topic I will deal today. And we have this closer area animal manure relationship that are important points for the things that follows. If you have another look at greenhouse gas balances of organic and conventional farms, these are data of a farm network we run in Germany over more than 10 years. And these are average data from these farms we compared. It's the mean, it's milk dairy farms and cash crop farms compared. On the left hand, we have the organic farms, 32, and on the right hand, the conventional farms, 33 farms. You see that the emissions of the whole cropping systems are nearly double in conventional farms. And the reason is mainly the fertilization. So you see that we have some emissions that are related to organic fertilization. It's just the generation of the organic manure in the stables, the greenhouse gas loads. And we have a high input of greenhouse gas emissions due to the energy demand of mineral fertilizers, which and we have additional and high input in conventional systems. And also the pesticides, the energy demand for the pesticides are important for the greenhouse gas balances in conventional farms. And you see in the mean of farms, the organic farms have sequestrating crop rotation, because they normally have legumes and multi-annual legumes in the rotation to generate the nitrogen. That is not inherent to most conventional systems at the moment, because even in the dairy farms, lots of feedstuff provision is based on silage, maize, and grass production, and not on legumes. So the sequestration is lower in these systems, and related to the lower nitrogen input we have, we also have less laughing gas emissions in these systems. And altogether, this is the reasons for really lower, 50% lower greenhouse gas emissions per area in the organic farms in the mean of all farms. What I have to say is that the range of the data is really high. So we have some really good conventional farms with high performance and low fertilizer inputs, good yields. They also have low greenhouse gas emissions per area, but we also have lower performing organic farms, but also high performing organic farms. And once more, if you look at the nutritive value, it's a cereal units related carbon dioxide emissions per cereal unit. It's lower in the organic farms. And if you look at the amount of bound energy in the plant productions, the greenhouse gas emissions are also lower concerned to the total bound energy in the plant production. So we have certain advantages of organic farms concerning climate gas emission, total climate gas emissions related to the area. If we come to the products, we can line up in the systems with the mean of conventional systems. So what do studies show on the special field of soil carbon sequestration and soil carbon enrichment in organic farms? We have an overview meta-analysis of Andreas Gattinger from Fiebel now at the University of Gießen. They compiled, he and his colleagues, data from 74 studies worldwide, mostly from temperate zones, and they found out that the soil organic carbon concentration differed around 0.5 to lower values of 0.818 percentage points in the soil. And they analyzed different studies. So if they put all the studies in the evaluations, and they reach higher numbers, and if they put more sophisticating techniques, so this is a zero net input, so these are only the farms which have not more than one livestock unit per hectare in the field, so we have no additional manure input from outside in these farms. And here we have additional farms in these analyses where we exactly know the carbon input in the studies. So if you go in more detail and in really sophisticating databases, you reach the lower end of organic matter enrichment by comparisons. But in the mean, organic farming is able to enrich soil carbon just by their general management procedures they have in their farms. So this is valid for soil organic, for carbon concentrations. It's valid for the carbon stock. So it's in organic farms, we have a range of 0.1 to 3.5 tons per hectare more carbon in soils if you compare it to conventional farms. And the soil sequestration rates over various time scales is between 0.1 to 0.4 tons per hectare carbon and year. So this is certainly limited, let's say, on a study duration of between 10 and 20 years. But that's a range we can surely count with if you compare comparable organic and conventional farms. And to give other dimensions, what might be the effect of organic agriculture in the EU? If you look at in the official reports on climate gas emissions from agriculture, you will see that the lower bar here, that in the official report to the EU is for agriculture, it's only laughing gas from soils and fertilizations is mentioned. And we have mentioned the methane emissions from the enteric fermentations and the ruminants and the manure handling. And carbon in soil is not in this official reporting. And these emissions from agriculture in the EU 27 in 2019 is around 386 million tons per year. This is 100%, I said it here. 100% is the total emissions of agriculture in the EU 27. And another important emission source are the emissions from peatland. It's the range of 57% of this total emissions, which is reported for agriculture, but it's not the carbon dioxide emissions from soils are not included in these official numbers. So just to give a dimension. So this is really important to look for these peatland emissions. So if we look at the potential of organic farming, I estimated that we have 25% organic farmland in future in the EU 27, and this is 100 million hectare cropland and 72 million hectare grassland. So if you would be able to generate an additional input, which is permanent of 100 kilogram per hectare soil organic carbon per year, This would make 2.4% of the total emissions which is reported yearly in the EU. So if you manage to have, let's say, 200 kilogram of carbon in the soils, this would be 5% of these emissions. And also other farming systems could contribute to this emission, let's say, accounting by having better carbon farming measures in their soils. These are the dimensions, and even in grassland is a potential. It's set on zero in this graph here, because the normal way to treat grassland is that it's carbon neutral. Nothing will emit on a net basis. But surely if you increase biodiversity or integrate deep rooting plants, you can create a sink here as well to increase the total percentage of farming systems. So we have to care for the peatland soils, even in organic farms. If we check our management, we should increase the organic farm cropland. We should care for the grassland biodiversity and grassland management to have some gains here as well, for, let's say, proper enrichment of carbon in the soils and long-term enrichment. And we have to keep this management after this. And we should know that carbon farming, that's what I said before in one of the first slides, has already lower nitrogen laughing gas emissions from soils and fertilizations, and they have lower enteric manure emissions because they have a lower livestock number per area. So these are additional effects organic farming has already today. So what can be done additionally in organic farms to enrich carbon in soils and protect the carbons in the soil, and to keep it also in times of increasing temperatures and climate change? And you see in these two pictures I have chosen, and that we have completely different systems in organic farming. We have large-scale field production of salad here in the upper picture, and you see we have no soil cover. We have a highly cultivated crops, the soil between the rows, and you can imagine that with such a system, it's hard to keep the organic carbon in the soil. And we have, let's say, more garden production of vegetables where the rows are more dense, where we have a full soil cover. We surely have more turnover of organic matter on the whole area. It's a high organic matter turnover system, and you can imagine that this will have completely different effects on soil carbon as well. So what can be done and what should be done in organic farms to improve biomass turnover and root mass directly on farm? That's one central element to increase also organic carbon in soil in the long term. You should use undersown crops and cover crops, even in organic crop rotations. You should avoid unnecessary soil cultivation. You should increase multi-annual crop rotation elements further, and this is also to provide soil, to provide lower soil cultivation and soil cover. And you should combine this with biogas and livestock management, because only with these two systems you will have an efficient recycling of nutrients and carbon at the end. And if you think on biogas production or biomass production, you can also have regenerative energy and can replace fossil burning materials, and this will have positive effects for the climate as well. So another point is to increase phytobiodiversity and share of legumes and grassland. It is known the more diverse the roots are in soil, you can sequester more carbon by this, and so this phytobiodiversity might be essential for long-term protection and enrichment of carbon in grassland soil, but also in cover crop plant covers. And you could establish hedges and trees to take the profit from the above ground carbon binding by trees and hedges who are present for longer times in the landscape. This is a good way to contribute to carbon sequestrations above the soil, but also below the soil. You will have certain effects on the concentrations and on the stock, except you destroy grassland with these hedges and trees. That might be a drawback. So that if you destroy grassland, only the above ground biomass is a component that is good, that binds the carbon and contributes to climate protection. And as I said before, protection and rewetting of peatland is always an issue in agriculture. And what I also want to highlight is that also combination of different measures can be of use and can increase the carbon binding in soil further. There's a new study of colleagues who analyzed tillage system and the use of cover crops and the input of organic matter and manures. And if you combine cover crops with the use of manure, you can be sure that some of the manure carbon can enter deeper soil layers, and maybe by this combination you will have positive effects in the subsoil on the carbon contents. But that's always dependent on the management on the site and the situations you have in your farm. This is how the new landscapes should look like. It should be green in most periods of the year. You can do this with undersown crops, but also with mixed crops is something possible to provide a higher plant cover density. We should have cover crops in as often as possible. You should integrate side strips, which are permanent. You can do also grow flowers here, and you can establish hedges. Even used hedges are possible. And you should integrate trees and agroforestry in the landscapes to have an above ground carbon binding. And as I said, you should create more diversity and integrate legumes in the grassland, and you should be aim not to disturb the sward, so no plowing techniques for grassland renovations are more advantageous than plowing and disturbing techniques. And also in lots of grassland sites might be rewetted, might be extensified. That has an effect on the carbon binding in the soil as well. Yes, and also these multi-annual crops, I said, need perfect management. So it's sometimes easier to change the system from just arable systems to systems with livestock to make a use of the additional biomass and to ease the cultivations after the cropping. And maybe this is a point which is important for the whole agriculture. If we have more grassland or more multi-annual crops, we would need more livestock in the landscape to graze it and to use it. But it shouldn't be more livestock units at the end to have an effect to the climate. Yes, one last view on results of colleagues from the University of Munich. They had several randomized trials on the fertilization and backflow of biogas manure to fields with various proportions of clover grass lays in their plots between 2005 and 2017. You see it, the most plots had proportions of 22-23% of clover grass over this period. And you see the soil organic carbon content is in these plots is between 1 and 1.6% in the topsoil. And if you increase the proportion of clover grass in these crop rotations, you see also the soil organic carbon content increases heavily. So this is 80%. So that's no management and arable farmer would use. But if you move from, let's say, 22 to 30% of clover grass lays in your rotation, you can have an increase of 0.1% soil organic carbon that makes 4 tons per hectare of soil organic carbon in the topsoil layer. So it's not irrelevant what you do then. So the proportion of clover grass lays on the plot is a long-term measure to increase carbon in soils, and it is of use, and it can be used, and it can be effectively used. And you also see on this slide that the input of digestase clearly has an effect on the concentrations in soil. If you manage a perfect recycling of your own additional biomass in your fields, you can put it in the soil and you can keep the equilibrium of carbon at a higher level. So to come to an end and final conclusions, and to discuss the whole topic a little bit more, you must know that even in organic farming, we talk about the dynamic equilibrium of carbon and soil. So the soil organic carbon development is always dependent from the biomass input, and you cannot cut off this biomass input, let's say, for 5 years and start again. So you will have a heavy losses later on in this time. So also the site history is of importance. Also Hannah mentioned this. If the starting point and the saturation of carbon is already high, it's hard to increase it and to have additional to have additional carbon binding. So, but we have probably high initial effects, especially on degraded land. So if you converse, let's say, farms which have never had clover grass in the crop rotations for generations, you will have a high effect on the organic carbon in the first years. So the introduction of carbon farming on intensively conventional farmland will have a short-term effect. So I said it is the biomass and the biomass transfer must be additional. It's only effective to use the biomass you generated on your own farm or on, let's say, adjacent farms, and you can transfer it to your own farm then, but you need to know that this biomass is newly generated in comparison to the situation before. Only then it's a climate measure which is really valid. And we don't know about the reversibility of the whole thing. We have heard in the morning that during climate change we will have heavy losses of soil organic carbon due to dryness and increasing temperatures. So also maintaining of soil organic is important in management. What we do not know is that the subsoil, what with the potential of the subsoil, it's probably high, but it's underused, and most is unknown here. But it's clear that if you have deep-rooted systems and if you manage to get the subsoil integrated in the enrichment of carbon, we have a high potential, but this has to be developed, and it's really dependent of the site you have and the soil you have on your site. And we also know that the roots and the root carbon is highly important. So all organic farmers have to evaluate the systems, and even scientists have to do it. We should rise and keep soil organic farming in organic farmed soil organic carbon in organic farm soils by more biomass growth on the site itself and recycling directly on the farms of this biomass. We should provide soil cover and soil rest, and we should provide diverse deep root systems, and we should also only take care that we have a careful tillage. Yes, that's what I want to say and contribute. Maybe we can discuss it in the following.
Yes, thank you very much, Hans Martin, for a very interesting talk with interesting figures, I think. I see some questions in the chat. Please feel free all to add some discussion points if you have them in the chat. Then I will ask them, Hans Martin and Hannah. One clarifying thing, Hans Martin. You talked about, I think, 56% of emissions from peatland. Is that included in the bar for the total agricultural?
No.
That's on top of that, actually.
So the reporting of this complete land use issues, also forestry and forests, wood and carbon bound in the forest is not reported at the moment, but it shall be done in the future. So we, all this is land use change in forestry. It's an important issue in the current discussions to on the climate.
Yeah. And another question that I had myself as well, and this might be interesting for both Hans Martin and Hannah, but maybe first Hans Martin. When you look at your figures with the bars, but also the table, you see that the emissions are actually like very high compared to the potential for carbon sequestration. Do you see that as a current issue in the carbon farming debate, that there is not enough attention to the emissions, or that it actually should be more included in the conversations and discussions about carbon farming?
Yes, maybe give me a shot. I shouldn't. I think that we shouldn't take it out. So, but we should be clear that the dimension is not so big in face of the other emissions, but it's of extremely high importance for the performance of future farming. So you need to care for your soils. That's what we have to be done. And if you reduce the other emissions, the carbon in soils and biomass has more effect in total. So it's a system which has been looked at together. But maybe Hannah, you can add to this.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, definitely we have to, as also mentioned before, we have to prioritize or look mainly to emission reductions, not only in the agricultural systems, but in all other sectors as well, since there's also debate about carbon markets and maybe using carbon farming to offset emissions from other sectors. And as we see, the potential is the potential is limited, let's say it like this. And so it can contribute, but maybe also more to adaptation, like resilience, and as Hans Martin just said, like to contribute to healthy soils and ensure sustainable and production and yields over a longer period of time.
Yeah, thank you. And in your presentation, Hannah, you also talked about that you definitely see potential for rewarding farmers for carbon farming measures, and you called out the cap, for example. Do you see that is happening right now with the current new cap proposal and the national strategic plans? Is there a role for carbon farming in there, you think?
So yeah, exactly. We think that farmers should be rewarded, but proportional to the benefits and the contributions that they're having. And yeah, actually, we've just analyzed a couple of weeks ago the national strategic plans in light of the organic 25% target. And yeah, unfortunately, there's a big gap between what's currently planned and to reach the 25% target. So yeah, what we see now is that they don't significantly contribute to the development of organic farming. So yeah, there's still a lot to do to ensure that this target is reached. We've also created a short report about it, so I'm happy to share it also in the chat if anyone is interested to have a closer look also about the different countries, what is done, because we strongly encourage to set a target at national level in proportion of the overall EU 25% target. But unfortunately, in some countries, there's either no target or it's not ambitious enough.
Yeah. No, but what I get from your guys' presentations, from the numbers that Hans Martin is showing, is that his goal of 25% organic can also contribute to the goals of carbon farming. So that's interesting in this perspective as well. I see some questions coming in. I will first go to one of Jan again, and then I will go to Grace's question as well. There's a question that I was also curious about because we had a presentation this morning. I don't know if you were there, Hans Martin, by the Slim Landgebruik Dutch researchers, and they actually showed way higher numbers than this 0.1 ton per hectare per year that you are using in your calculations.
Yeah,
Do you
okay.
think there's actually a lot of potential for
Mm.
higher sequestration?
Yes, so I would say that's a minimum number for organic farming if you introduce it. So we have seen in the review of Göttingen that the range is higher. We find, but as I said, it depends on the site you have. It depends on the site history. And if you give average for organic farming, it's not good to set it too high for all farms, but the potential is much higher. I would agree to this. But I also want to stress that you need to keep up with the management and the measures to keep the carbon in soil. So don't be too don't set the expectations too high. It's more easy to start at a lower point and be glad if you manage more. I'm sure that there will be more. We know from introduction of multi-annual crops like clover grass and the rotations that the increase is more than that.
Yeah, thank you. That's clear. Then the question of Case. Casey was asking to bind carbon in the soil as humus, you also need the nitrogen actually to feed soil life and thus build soil organic matter. How can we find the optimal balance between adding enough nitrogen for crop produce without increasing the laughing gas losses? Do you have an answer to that, Hans Morten, maybe?
Yes, I can try. So what we know is that from growing clover grass, we have no more emissions from nitrogen dioxide from laughing gas than from other sites. So it's always a question of management. If you plow it for the wrong time, you will have more emissions. You have to keep the nitrogen in the system. That's what organic farming always has to do. But we know that the complete nitrogen balance of organic farms, including legumes, is lower than the conventional intensive farming, and that's a good hint that we are on the right way. And then we have to look for the management. And true, we need the nitrogen to feed the soil life, but we have the nitrogen in the legumes, so that's a question of the mixtures we use.
Yeah, interesting. There's probably a lot to learn for both conventional and for organic farmers to how to best use the natural nitrogen
Yes,
binding
the other way
in
around.
this
So they have to
perspective.
go for carbon sequestration crops and fertility protecting crops. And so the organic farmers should learn how to use legumes and legume mixtures and how to adapt the fertilizations. And they do.
Yeah. And I see another interesting question, maybe for you, Hanna. Do you think there should be specific carbon farming programs for the organic sector, or should the organic sector join the conventional system methods for carbon farming and probably rewarding?
Yeah, interesting question because since there are different starting points, it's good question. But I think what's important is to support organic or agroecological approaches, which will deliver at the same time also increased soil organic carbon stocks. And what is key as well is to no matter which farming system then, but to ensure biodiversity and environmental safeguards that so that we don't have any trade-offs with biodiversity or soil water protection goals.
Yes, may I add? So it's
for
really
sure.
important to address these side effects. So the whole agroecology, because the carbon enrichment is endless, will end after 10, 15 years of management. It may end, so you are not able to sequester more carbon in soil after this time, maybe. And so you have to have a look for the other effects you have, and they are really clear. So you save fertilizers, you save pesticides, and you have more biodiversity. You ensure infiltration of water. You protect for erosion processes. So all the carbon farming measures in organic farms, but also in conventional farms, have other positive effects. Maybe we should just communicate that we have an additional effect on the climate by the carbon we bind in organic soils, and not pay for this.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's yeah. I think an interesting concluding discussion. Also, I'm looking at the time, and it's good to wrap up. Um, but I think what you were saying is very true, but it's hard to convey the message of the system approach. But we live in a complex world. I think that needs complex answers. But it's easy, of course, to pick one thing out and look at that, and look at one solution. But I think your presentations both make clear there is actually carbon farming also exists in a wider agricultural system that also needs to be addressed as a whole. But it seems very interesting also for carbon farming within the organic movement to move forward and give it a place within the system approach that we try to do as a farming system as a whole, I think. Yeah, Hans Martin and Hanna, thank you very much for this for your interesting talks and discussion. Hanna, if you were willing, I think, to share those documents, please do in the chat. I guess people might be interested. And I think for now there are still 2 other webinars going on at 4 o'clock, so people have time to grab a drink, stretch their legs for a little bit. And for now, thank you very much.
Okay, bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.